topic for our second panel is all about data privacy and data security, the guardians of growth. More Filipinos are starting to open up to online payments and mobile wallets. A report from PayPal shows that the pandemic made 87% of Filipinos increase digital payment usage, be it from food deliveries to bill payment. The 2020 Philippines Consumer Survey further revealed that 9 out of 10 Filipinos prefer to pay online than with cash during this time. But with mass adoption comes great responsibility in terms of data security. Today, to talk about the indispensable role of data privacy and data security in business today, we have industry leaders from all over the world. May I now introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Matthew O'Keefe, ASPAC Cyber Lead of KPMG Australia.
Good afternoon and thank you. Welcome. Are you happy for me to jump into the presentation? Thank you. So, good afternoon and thank you again for the opportunity to make a couple of observations today in terms of the topic of cybersecurity. If we could, I really wanted to keep my comments relatively brief today in two areas really. What are we seeing from an emerging perspective in cybersecurity? Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic is having a significant impact. But then secondly, what are we seeing organisations do? And so just a couple of brief comments there, and really in the intent of kicking off the conversation today with a number of my highly qualified and esteemed colleagues here across a broad spectrum of really valid topics. If we could move to the next slide, please. Just in terms of where we are seeing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on cybersecurity. So as we step back, firstly, and think about organisations, be that commercial enterprises, government businesses serving citizens, and the plethora of other businesses that are out there. We're really seeing the impact of COVID in three areas. The first area is in a significant increase in focus and desire around digital business. Organisations who didn't have an ability to interact with their customers or citizens prior to the pandemic now see that they must have a digital presence. Those organisations that did have a digital presence through to a strong digital presence now really understand how reliant they are on that particular channel or approach and want more of that in terms of digital business. And I'll just call out the nuance. It's not just digital channels, so selling my traditional products and services through a digital website or similar, but it's organisations exploring digital products, digital operations, fully digitising their businesses, and also having digital channels to market. The second area we've seen is a significant acceleration in the journey to the cloud. So prior to the pandemic, we were seeing organisations, large and small, particularly on the large end, who had existing on-premise technology operations, starting to move towards the cloud, but taking a cautious and steady approach, dabbling with private cloud or hybrid. We've seen a real speed now, and that organisations are going straight to public cloud and are building a lot of confidence in that space. And then the third area I would call out is that we are seeing flexible working arrangements here to stay. Organisations are recognising that they need to extend their footprint to deal with their employees being at home and we're seeing now the concept of the home hub, the office hub, a mobile hub, and those sorts of things. Each of these three dimensions has some significant ramifications from a cyber point of view, and I've commented down the bottom there around those. But I'd also call out from a FinTech perspective, When I step back and look at this, fintechs are all about digital business. Every fintech I know is in the cloud, and they're all about flexible working arrangements. And indeed, part of the attraction of working out of fintech is around the flexibility as well. So all three topics I think are pretty key in terms of thinking about fintechs. So I might just pause there on the impact of the pandemic. And if I can go to the next slide, please. As we start to look forward out of the other end of the pandemic, we've got 8 topics here that we are seeing organisations look to and address with respect to cyber. The first is what we're calling addressing the security deficit. And that's really about organisations serving both customers and citizens had to their kind of pandemic footing and go mobile and flexible working arrangements very, very quickly. It was a matter of business survival at that point. Some cybersecurity controls were foregone in that process or weren't fully implemented, and now we need to catch up on those. That's an important activity there. We are seeing a significant step up in cost pressure in businesses. It's an obvious outcome in terms of the economic consequences of lockdowns and impacts on costs of health systems and the like. We know that that's going to put forward pressure on budgets, and the cyber budget inside organisations is not going to be immune to that. So we're going to have to be a lot more focused on aligning our security activities around the crown jewels of the organisation. What are the key data assets, technology assets and processes, and how do we make sure we secure those? The third point we are seeing is a significant uplift around the concept of digital trust and identity and consumer trust in our systems, particularly when we go to digital business. And so there's a lot of activity in that space around making security easy to use, but still appropriately secure for the nature of the business. Around the evolving security team, we're involved, KPMG were involved in some research just recently in the UK, which identified 3.5 million cyber roles in the world at the moment that are currently unfilled. Cyber resources are scarce resources, and so we need to be very focused on how we use those resources and make sure that we are pointing our security team at the most important things and thinking about how we get best bang for buck out of them. Just turning to the second column, we are seeing under the banner of regulation, increasing regulation, be that, for example, in Thailand and stepping up privacy legislation, or where we see in countries where there is existing legislation that regulators are really stepping into the cyber regulation and looking for compliance and are looking to enforce that. I've already touched on cloud transformation, but securing the cloud is a critical activity from a cyber point of view. The green box here, I think, is a massive topic, and one that is going to be, I think, a continuous focus area for the next 5 to 10 years in organisations in their cyber activities. And that is, how do we automate more and more activities in the cyber function? Be that from threat identification, threat correlation activities and response activities through to identity, through to user provisioning, all sorts of things like that. And then lastly, what we are seeing in cyber as a part of this, in particular in digital business, is around making sure that our organisations are designed around resilience, and that high resilience is designed in, and I think that most organisations who perhaps pre-pandemic were not convinced, I'm certain they are convinced now. Moving to the next slide, if I could, and just to touch on what we're seeing mature organisations look for in their approach to cyber. And there are a number of levels here. Organisations that are tackling cyber well, and by tackling cyber well, I would say very clearly, it is not a one set of activities and you're solved. It is not a silver bullet type approach, but it is an ongoing and continuous activity. And the reason we need to do this, it is much like servicing a car. We want to continue to get benefit out of technology, and we want to be able to continue to use it. And without a continuous ability to maintain that technology, much like you would maintain your car, it will fall apart on you. We see it at a number of levels in organisations. We see it from the board down, and that is to make sure that the board really understands the program that the organisation is pursuing, understands the cyber strategy, and is part of the reporting process and also the response process when a breach will occur. And I'll come back to that terminology. I've already touched on the importance of making sure that cyber has a really clear line on the business value and the business strategy approach, because we will need to make trade-offs. We can't secure everything. It's just not economic. Building on that, smart spending and targeted investment around cyber in high-risk areas, making sure that we balance business performance with our technology and cyber risks. We can't lock everything down. We need to let people have access. We need to take a balanced risk management approach and deal with that. Establishing 3 lines of defence with a cyber-specific lens, we are seeing more mature organisations go down this path. This is not easy, and lots of organisations are challenged with this, but the CISO sitting at the first line, matched by capable cyber resources in the second line of the organisation, plus having the audit functions being third line, having a role in cyber as well. So we're seeing the well-established risk management principles of 3 lines of defence specifically applied to cyber. And then lastly, with any organisational activity, clear responsibility and accountability. And with that, I would say goes measurement and the ability to measure an effective cyber program and outcomes is an art as much as it is a science, I would offer. If we could move to the next page, I just wanted to make one more observation for organisations, and that is really the balance between prevention, detection, and response. Lots of organisations have reasonably well-established prevention activities in place, the firewalls blocking a whole range of things, so on and so forth. But as organisations pursue more digital business on the cloud or are using more flexible working arrangements, they are becoming more and more ecosystems. We must let people into our systems to be effective, so we need to be able to enhance our detection capability and in particular our response capability. I say to all boards that I'm working with, it is not a matter of if you will have a cyber incident, but it is when you have a cyber incident. And if you take a setting of when you have a cyber incident, and you have appropriately mature response plans, you've practiced those plans so that you know they work and people inside your organisation are educated on them, your objective must be maintaining trust with your customers or your citizens through cyber incidents. And there are a number of examples where organisations get that wrong, but there are also a number of examples where organisations get that right, and they are able to maintain that level of trust and the stickiness with their customers. So if I can move to the last slide, if I could, just 4 or 5 questions here that I use with organisations, and I challenge the board to ask these questions of management. I challenge management to ask these questions of themselves. And I would reflect for FinTechs that this can be a very good checklist for you to be able to effectively deal with, in particular, more traditional organisations you might be partnering with or seeking to provide their digital business or some of their digital business needs. So the first question is, how effective is our cybersecurity strategy at addressing our risks? So implicit within this question is a strong understanding of your cybersecurity strategy and a strong understanding of your business and its risks as well. The second question is, do we have a really strong view on our ecosystem? More and more use of third parties and understanding what information is sensitive and where it sits is critical. Thirdly, we see, and we have a view in KPMG that the cyber security market is evolving about every 18 months, that it really takes a step change and it's quite a quick market. So keeping on top of the threat landscape in your organisation, in your industry and in your markets, when things are moving internally and changing, your people are changing, your external market is changing, is an important activity. And how do the various layers of the organisation, from your board through your management and your cyber team, stay abreast of those issues. Fourthly, and this is, I think, the hardest question to answer here, do we have information to oversee cyber risks? What do we measure? How regularly do we measure, and what does it tell us? And then my last point, which comes back to my my observation, it's not if but when, is how do we know that our cyber incident response plan is going to work? How regularly are we testing it? Are we testing it on a range of different cyber scenarios? Do people understand their roles? So on and so forth. So I might conclude there and use that to, I think, provide some kickoff for our panel activities.
Thank you so much, Sir O'Keefe. Now let me introduce the panelists that will join Sir in this panel discussion about cybersecurity. First up, we have Mr. Anton Bonifacio, Chief Information Security Officer of Globe. We have Commissioner Raymund E. Liboro from the National Privacy Commission. We have Ms. Attorney J.J. Disino, Managing Partner at Disino Law Office. Moderating this panel, we have Mr. Diego Jose Ramos, Chief Innovation Officer of Impact Hub. Sir Diego, I turn it over to you. Sir, I think you're on mute.
Hello, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us at the Philippine stage for the World FinTech Festival. And I'm so glad that the efforts of Geyser McLeod made this possible. Dynamic team, and heads up to them. Hats up. So I would like to thank Matt for that like high level questions on cybersecurity, and we now will lead you through more and more questions as we go on. I'd like to direct first a question to Anton. Anton, I'm a big supporter of Globe in terms of what I do, and they've been with me since I started my my entry to the startup world doing hackathons. So Globe was
Diego, I think you might be on mute.
Hello?
Yeah, better.
Oh, okay.
So I missed the question, Diego.
Sorry, Anton, I'd like to direct this to you. Recently, I've heard about the recent acquisition of Globe with the cloud services.
Cascade.
What was the benefit to that to your company and to your clientele? Did you create an advantage edge, and what's the impact on that on your system?
I think it's so the acquisition was largely for our enterprise customer base, to be able to provide better solutions for them. But I guess, much related, to the larger cloud conversation, even before that acquisition, I mean, I think, Globe has been on the forefront of, having a cloud first policy. I mean, I think we've also discussed on the side, how the DICD has also been trying to approach that. I mean, so, we've been actively moving, or at least trying to move a lot of our old, legacy stuff onto the cloud. The great thing is, we view cloud not as a security impediment, but as a security enabler, right? Which is why I think, currently we're still the #1, if not the, top customers of AWS, largest customers of AWS in the Philippines. We have 2 direct connect links because me personally, as a CISO, I have been helping drive cloud migration, just because I can say for a fact that it's easier to secure your assets in the cloud than it is in your legacy, systems and data center infrastructure. So I think, it would benefit a lot of companies to be able to see the cloud as an enabler of security rather than it is, because most of the conversations are always like, oh, you know what, cloud is scary for security. If you actually really dig into it, I mean, it's really not, right? Because there's a lot of better stuff that you can do on the cloud and actually make security life much easier than it is.
Diego, I think you're on mute again.
Hello?
If I could just echo your comments there, Anton, in terms of the cloud. I am firmly of a view that cloud is generally more secure than on-prem. I would say with the more sophisticated cloud providers, and you've mentioned AWS, which I think falls into that category, you've got to do the work to make sure you are securing appropriately. But I would say in cloud, all of the tools are there and available, and you can access the capability. On-prem, I'm not so sure that's the case, and that's the way I think about the comparison.
Yeah. Yes. Anton? You're on mute.
So in response to the question, right? Like I said, I mean, I do think it's a great enabler, which is why we're fully committed to cloud migration, to adoption of solutions. Like it's, aside from the acquisition of that company to be able to sell to our enterprise customers, I mean, cloud first is really a big part of the overall technology strategy of Globe Telecom, even for our security stack.
And I would like to move this conversation, Anton. My entry in the startup ecosystem was about 2013. That was a time when we had about 2.3 active users of million active users of credit cards. Not yet FinTech, although the first FinTech in the world started in the Philippines. What from that time on till today? What are the measures you've done in making our infrastructure more solid and more secure?
Well, hopefully I don't hog too much time because this is a loaded question. So I'd love to be able to answer it. Luckily for me, for Globe, security and data privacy has always been centered around customer service. As a customer-centric organization, we've already invested over $90 million in cybersecurity over the past 6 years, which I think has been more than the median for most listed companies. And it's one simple purpose is really just about customer trust. I'm one of the lucky few CISOs where the domain is not looked at as an investment or a matter of compliance. ROI was never a metric or KPI we were measured for. The only question by the board always was, are we protecting our customers? Are we doing what is right by them? So it has always been a top-level matter for senior management and the board being part of the company's top 10 risks. And cybersecurity and privacy was always placed in the top 5 for the greater half of this decade. That being said, it's great to see this approach, security hinged around customer care, be more pervasive across larger enterprises. One of the things we have done this year, for example, is work very closely and partner with all of the major banks in the Philippines. BDO, Metro Bank, BPI, Union Bank, almost every listed company, actually, a bank we've worked with just this year. Financial fraud, especially during the pandemic, has skyrocketed, not just for traditional banks, but also for fintechs. Phishing, vishing, smishing, and whatnot are truly really rampant. So the initiative really all started with that commitment to reducing spam, scams, and fraud within our network. So what we did is we have active groups, chats, and channels with all of these major banks where we do proactive and reactive collaboration to be able to protect their customers. So the degree of engagement that you see is really rooted in caring for our common customers to make sure they're protected. So we don't charge the banks for this collaboration. We block websites, SMS senders, callers, so on and so forth. And I think even the banks have acknowledged that this level of cooperation is a first in the Philippines. And I think it's a great sign for the domain as a whole that we're ensuring we're not leaving security behind as the country is going through this massive digital push and transformation, right? We're glad that Globe is at the forefront of that and helping lead the rally. But you can also see that, when we engage the banks, they're not also doing it as a matter of compliance, because the BSP told us so. They're doing it because they genuinely care for their customers. And I think that shared value is what is allowing us to really push that needle forward and push that envelope forward to be able to ensure that, as I mentioned, we're not left behind, because I think that this pandemic has provided a great opportunity for a digital push and transformation for the country as a whole.
Well, I agree with you, Anton, but I'd like to confer with Attorney JJ. Attorney JJ, the constitution construct of our law is what is not written is allowed. Do you agree with this one, or do you think that we have policies now in our justice system that is at par with global standards? Attorney, you're on mute.
I think they put us all on mute. I'm sorry about that. So I think where we are right now is we're at a point of inflection. We have been in this space for many years. Entrepreneurs in this space, in the tech space, have been around for 20, 25 years. Dominic Danao is a name that that comes to mind way back in the late 90s with was it Ed Mail, and he's still around, right? But and I think so. We've been very open in terms of allowing the internet to enter, internet businesses to operate in the country with very minimal regulation, except in areas where there's very established rules. But I think where we are right now is we're beginning to re-examine that notion, and the Philippine government is now looking at the possibility of actively getting involved and having a policy with respect to regulating not just areas, but I think we might see the beginnings of government agencies considering sort of an overarching strategy with respect to data. So we already have the data privacy law, we have cybersecurity laws, the DICT is now looking at cybersecurity. So I think it's all coming to a head. And one of the other things that we need to look at is, of course, data sovereignty, things of that nature. And I think the conversation is starting, and FinTech is a large part of that because data is essential for FinTech to grow. Data sharing is essential for FinTech to grow, but we have laws in this country which are, like, we are one of the few countries in the world that have a comprehensive deposit secrecy law. As I understand it, the only other country is Lebanon. And so that needs to be addressed. If there's going to be open finance, open banking, this data needs to be able to flow across fintechs and financial institutions.
Do you think, attorney, that we are at the point that banks now are willing to share that data as well, altogether?
I think if you look at the way banks have evolved in this country, they have a tendency to really corral their customers and not share customers with each other. So it's not uncommon for a business here to have not one bank, but to have 5 or 6 bank accounts because because you have to have it, because the banks don't interconnect. It's very hard to move money between banks. And I think what's happening is that the BSP, and this is a welcome development, is nudging the banking sector towards the interconnection, as it were, in the telco sector. But at the same time, what the BSP is hanging over the head of the banks is that they're growing this fintech industry, and they're basically telling the banks, look, you can do it, you can join, or these fintechs are going to do it for you. And people are going to pull their money from the banks, put it on a digital wallet, and then you're going to lose that. So they're using a bit of persuasion here, regulatory persuasion, but also they're pointing out to them that from a technology standpoint, this thing is inevitable, and either you get on board or you don't. And the pandemic, right, accelerated all of that. I was just reading an article by the financial historian Niall Ferguson, where he was talking about the Black Death in Europe, where it accelerated monetization, right, the adoption of money. And that's what we're seeing now, except what we're seeing now is an adoption of digital forms of transacting using value. So what we need to see, I think, moving forward is hopefully this nudging continues, and we see this sort of convergence within the fintech sector, and that will be beneficial to all our users.
Yes, Attorney JJ and everyone, Anton, Matt, I'm particular about the question that some of my friends would be contacting me from overseas, from London. They are actually non-bank fintech companies that would love to enter the Philippines. Attorney JJ, do you think we have enough policies and economic share benefits for them to come over?
I think there are market segments they can enter. I mean, the fintech space is highly competitive in the Philippines, if only because I believe we're number 3 in the world in terms of inbound remittances. And so the volume of money coming from foreign sources to the Philippines is huge. And we have a large unbanked sector where that money goes. So that money comes from people with bank accounts overseas, and it's landing with unbanked people here. And that money can be, if they know how to use that, if they can be part of the banking sector, then they can leverage that money. And therefore, we can provide them with other services, and we can leverage that money coming in and use that for economic growth. And that's the challenge that the BSPs basically put to everyone. Digital transformation, digital inclusion, financial inclusion, I think is very, very important. And a key to that is the fintech sector. And I think the BSP is very excited in that regard.
Attorney JJ, before we go on to our next keynote, I would just like to know if you're working on a timetable where you let's say you regulate all banks to be on that full digital transformation. Is there a timeline that you're working together with government agencies, or is it just a free way?
I think that so I used to believe in the power of regulation to really change things, and that's true, especially in a highly regulated space like the fintech sector. But I think what really pushes things forward more than regulation. I mean, regulations can provide the platform for development, but what is going to push this is number one, technological adoption, right? And consumers are basically voting with their phones, voting with their feet, right? And saying this is the services that we want. And I think the banks will follow suit. And I have great faith in our banking sector that they are going to pick up on fintech very quickly, and they will adopt it because I think that is the future.
I
guess just to
that.
I guess just to echo that real quickly, before the next one, like Gcash, for example, saw 1,000% transaction growth. Martha has shared this 1 trillion transaction value just this year, right? So I do agree. I don't, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think this is going to be so much of policy or regulatory driven, because it is going to be customer demand driven, right? We see what the customers require and want, and I think really just having a customer centric approach, adhering to that demand. Equally, security, for example, will have to go through that, right?
That's true. But before I go further with the conversation, Anton and Attorney JJ and Matt, I would like to go on further after this one. After this talk would be how quick is our auditing banking policies can adopt new policies created by FinTech. But beforehand, we'd love to hear. Of course, we're thrilled to have him on this session. This session is not complete without the National Privacy Commission Commissioner. Please welcome Raymund Liboro. Commissioner.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Matt. Just listening to Attorney JJ Disino and Anton Bonifacio is already the main dish. And really, I thought that your audience already had their lunch of ideas full after listening to the two of them. But, thank you for inviting me to this prestigious World FinTech Festival. I wish to congratulate you and the group for really promoting the twin importance of data privacy and data security, the guardians of growth. You see, data for good must flow openly to reduce transaction costs and lessen the friction for products and services to reach customers in a high-trust environment. Data protection authorities understand that it is essential to establish a conducive and consistent regulatory space that promotes innovation, a level playing field, and business certainty. Privacy regulators must continue to encourage companies to be accountable to their customers and discourage those who refuse to be responsible and expose citizens to harm. The critical point is finding that balance between maximizing the beneficial use of data and ensuring that citizens' public interests and legitimate privacy concerns are primordial. Equally important is for the data protection authorities to be transparent and clear in its guidance to the industry on what to do. As data protection authorities, we try our best to be enablers and protectors and prove to everyone that prosperity and data privacy are on the same side. The fintech industry has broken boundaries and transcended borders, enabling the unbanked sector to move towards financial inclusion. The Commission recognizes that this new development will improve national development and growth, mainly to bridge the underserved and unbanked Filipinos towards financial, social, and economic inclusion. The Commission has not shied away from exploring and supporting emerging technologies to bring about a robust and sustainable economy. However, such innovation sometimes prove to be both boon and bane, because while progress and development are assured, it likewise presents risks to the individual's freedoms and privacy availing of such services when the same is left rampant and unchecked. Last year, complaints mounted against some lending entities operating online lending applications. The complaints claim that these lending entities, through the online apps, process their clients' data without lawful basis and use this data to shame and humiliate data subjects who have defaulted on their loan payments in violation of their rights and freedoms. The usual complaints are harassment, unfair collection practices, the access to phone book contacts and list of borrowers, high interest rate on the loan, and public shaming. The Commission took the proactive step of taking down 26 online lending applications that violated the Philippine Data Protection Act. The NPC has likewise initiated cooperative efforts with social media platforms, providers such as Google, to ensure that such illegal practices are prevented from the onset. The NPC took the next step of coming up with policies to protect consumers, providing for guidelines on the processing of personal data for loan-related transactions. The circular reminded online lending providers to uphold data subjects' rights, particularly to information and access. Transparency is vital too to address borrowers' concerns. They must provide all the necessary information to the borrowers and secure valid consent for the legitimate use of their data. The circular also prohibited online loan apps from asking for unnecessary permissions, such as unlimited access to the phone camera, photo gallery, contact list, or social media contacts for use in debt collection, or to harass the borrowers and their connections. We also work with the Philippines FinTech Alliance, a group of FinTech players, and come up with a FinTech code of practice that secure the rights and concerns of data subjects through loan transaction business. FinTechs must always bear in mind that information processing must not override individuals' rights and freedoms, especially since such processing can lead to a possible irreversible impact on the data subjects. As consumers shift to digital platforms in the wake of these emerging technologies, the Commission encourages FinTechs to adopt the privacy by design approach into its digital media. Embedding privacy by design in your digital play is critical in building digital resilience. These are the 7 foundational principles of privacy by design. This means being, number 1, proactive and not reactive, preventive and not remedial. It anticipates and prevents privacy events before they happen. Number 2, building privacy as a default setting means ensuring that privacy is built in and no further action is required from the individual to protect their privacy. Number 3, privacy embedded into the design means privacy by design, or PBD, went into the design and architecture of IT systems and business practices, putting privacy integral to the system without diminishing functionality. Number 4, full functionality. Make it a win-win for the business and the data subjects with no trade-offs. Number 5, full life cycle protection. This ensures end-to-end, cradle-to-grave security of data. Number 6, be transparent. Make sure that you are operating with a stated promotion and objectives. And last but not the least, number 7, ensure that your digital play is user-centric. Keep the interests of the individual primordial. Offer firm privacy defaults, notice, and user-friendly options. Indeed, privacy is an enabler of trust. Trust also promotes the use of data-driven products and services. Fortunately, unlike typhoons, earthquakes, or volcanic eruptions, privacy risks are man-made. Privacy risks can be prevented and mitigated. As we move to a post-COVID-19 world, your ability to protect data will be a competitive differentiator. Governments and businesses will be judged not only by their products and services, but also by their ability to secure data throughout its life cycle. Hence, as you form new business ventures, develop products and services, and innovative digital tools, I urge everyone to make data privacy and resilience your cornerstone. Through this, FinTech providers will help promote widespread trust, accountability, and responsibility to its consumers, guaranteeing the success of such financial technologies in the long term, helping national development and spurring the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think this is the legacy that could leave our country improving. You're right there at the very moment that we needed to come together as one nation, both private and government sector. Do you feel that cooperation, that full cooperation from the private sector in terms of developing inclusive policies, infrastructure? How do you feel about it?
Diego, let me just answer you quickly on that. And really, we are implementing a 21st century law for 21st century concerns. We cannot approach 21st century challenges with processes that we did in the past, or practices that we were used to in the past. And we have to approach this constructively with creativity and collaboration. Here in the NPC, our culture is twofold actually. It's a bias for action and a bias for collaboration. Our regulatory principles is hinged on two cornerstones: constructive stakeholder engagement and responsive regulation. I'm looking at the gentlemen here, Anton and JJ Disini. Recently, we launched a movement we call Kabataan Digital. Globe is a very big part of it to promote responsible use of digital, accountability, the practice of digital ethics, especially now that we have transported our educational environment to the home, to online. So it's very important that we promote it. This is just an example of what constructive stakeholder can do. JJ Disini, an expert, an Asian expert in privacy and security, has also been helping us craft policies and being the bridge to other institutions like the UP Law Center, who's also helping us in crafting policies. So
Do we have an interruption of connection?
Yep. Yes, Diego.
Yeah.
I mean, I
okay.
guess just to reinforce the statement of the NPC is that, right? You know, I think we've been very lucky that, you know, this is really, you know, the relationship is not regulator and company, right? You know, the NPC from the very beginning has been an enabler for us, which I think ties in very closely to what I was saying, right? That you know, I think it's nice to see within our, you know, industry here in the Philippines that sure, okay, granted that perhaps policies and whatnot may not be fully there yet, but I think that would be irrelevant in the sense that because the motivation is very customer centric, right? That we're companies are simply responding to what the customer needs are. And then being able to look at that, working with the NPC to help us enable, like for example, you look at the NPC as a source of information, right? To be able to help us, okay, how can we be more compliant? How can we be more, how can we better protect our customers, for example? Because I think the biggest problem with a compliance-based approach or a traditional regulatory-based approach is that companies will always do the bare minimum to be able to comply, as opposed to having a motivation centered around the customer, partnering with the NPC or other regulators. Then you have something that is a little bit more proactive, is never the minimum, but always the maximum, hinged around customer centricity.
That is true, Anton. But I'm curious. I'd like to put Matt in the conversation. Matt, I'd like to share an anecdote. I'm sure Amor Maklang of Geyser Maklang would not mind. We secretly look out globally for global standards for sometimes for policies and and processes. And Australia has been a shining glory for us in FinTech Philippines as well as PAD-CDI in building our standard towards it. From Australian perspective, Matt, how do you see the Philippines as a developing country complying to the standards that you are envisioning? Is there a close managing gap, or is it something we could work on?
I think it's something that's always got to be worked on. So So I'm going to make a couple of observations. If I could first just go back and join into the discussion there with the Commissioner and Anton's observations. I see a very distinct difference, unfortunately, in organisations who have not had a major privacy breach and those who have had a major privacy breach. Now, it's unfortunate, but it does play to your point, Anton, is it's a commercial world that many organisations live in, and they have to ration their resources carefully. But when an organisation's been through a breach, they've lost the trust of customers, they've had to undertake significant root cause analysis, investigation, remediation, and it impacts them for years to come. They no longer take a minimum compliance-based approach to many of these controls because they understand the importance that trust has in enabling their business outcomes. And so I firmly agree that cybersecurity controls and privacy controls are actually enablers of business, because you will lose customers if you lose their trust around that. So if I could just make that comment and connect to the previous observations. Diego, to the regulatory environment in Australia around privacy and generally around cyber, we are seeing a continuous level of focus in this space. This calendar year, we have had the Prime Minister, so it's the most senior government official in the country, directly comment in the media a number of times around the need for both government and commercial enterprise to lift our cybersecurity activities and controls. There is a significant amount of investment going into lifting the government controls in that space, and there is a significant amount of regulatory starch, if you like. So the regulations are in place, both in the privacy space with the national privacy principles and in sector by sector, but specifically here if we're talking financial services, through APRA, which is the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, just last week actually announcing that they are going to undertake a significant uplift in the compliance activities in the new calendar year around the financial services cyber controls. So it's a lot of move. It's very much always a moving feast and always progressing. I know that the regulator in Australia, they've said it publicly, they are not happy with our level of control at the moment. They think we're only one major breach away from something that threatens the system, I think, rather than just, not to put the word just in there, but rather than have a single organisation lose trust with its clients, they are thinking about systemic risk as well, and also, calling out very clearly that our financial services infrastructure is part of our national critical infrastructure, and it must be secured in that regard as well. So that's a bit of a more broad-ranging comment there, Diego, but I think my observation for the Philippines is this is a space that is going to continue to move fast, if not faster than it has to date.
Thank you very much, Matt, for your point. Yeah, going back, Commissioner, I have this invite a long time ago, making developers as one of the defenders of human rights, as well as part of that movement, Attorney JJ Disino, to move these things up together. Matt may not be aware, fully aware, or conscious about it, but he delighted us with such great news. So I just wanted to have this conversation and together with private sectors, Anton, and somewhere in between the conduit with is Attorney JJ. Of course, Geyser Maklang is a unifying catalyst to the industry. And Commissioner Liboro, I would like to ask, is there ready access information in case there are breaches of security that a private sector can do such protocol checks based on your development or policies? Is there already protocols? Normally in the private sector, we solve our own problems, but it's time to have a campaign to have help by the government.
Well, definitely, Diego, but just to also address some of the comments of Matt here. Of course, the Philippines Privacy Commission is a very young commission. We are implementing a very nascent law. But we have really endeavored in promoting it via policy, advice, information, dialogue, and support with our stakeholders. We have built a data privacy council composed of 22 industry and sectors to again be a feedback, not only a feedback mechanism, but actually so that we can have our feet on the ground and to really inform our policy making. And the information. We really believe that awareness and information is key. Also, you must understand that the Philippines is 110 million population strong. And really, when I looked at the demographics at the top 15 countries that have the biggest population, out of the 15, there are only 3 countries that have comprehensive data privacy laws, and that includes the United States and Japan ahead of the Philippines. And we have India, we have China. They're still on their journey through crafting their comprehensive laws. So really, as Matt mentioned, from firm level accountability and compliance, you will see that in the next few months and even years, that regional compliance and accountability will also be emphasized. And here in the region, we are moving very fast. And really focus, and JJ Disino and Anton, they're operating in a region that is really focused now on privacy and security, accountability and compliance. The ASEAN 6 alone, you're talking about Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, including Singapore, has a combined population greater than the EU's. And the EU is actually implementing a privacy law that has been there for 5 decades, 4 decades already. And once I'm mentioning this because this renewed interest, as Matt mentioned, really will augur well for the region. So you are really smack in the right direction here by putting these twin topics, giving it importance. So this event alone really helps in proving and pushing this awareness to more stakeholders, to more controllers and businesses. But for you're asking about information, yes, we try to keep our information, our framework simple. We have the 5 pillars of compliance. You have to appoint your data, and Anton knows this by heart. You have to appoint your data protection officer, know your risks by conducting your impact assessment, having a plan and putting it on paper, and demonstrating your accountability through day-to-day privacy and security measures. And last, be prepared for breach. So to all of you listening here, you can check our website. Only 3 things that you can do in our website, right? You can know more about privacy, you can complain, and you can comply. So for those of you who have not complied yet, check on our website.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That's a very insightful information. We never had that information before. It's just like first time in my ear now that we hear this information from the NPC.
Probably we must do a compliance check on your company. This is the first time you've heard about privacy. What do you think, Anton and JJ?
The NPC has been very loud for a very long time, which like I said, we certainly appreciate as a partner through this journey over the past 6-7 years.
Yeah, hey,
Actually,
Anton, my wife should hear you, Anton.
There's no more than readiness when we have comprehensive laws and we have solid infrastructure right there, and when we have great lawyers and we have great external, let's say, mentor and consultants on this conversation. Do you think we are ready to have that say hyper growth invitation for FDIs or foreign investments to come to the Philippines and start their business? What do you say about that, Anton?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think so, right? Like I said, us just seeing, for example, the massive growth of our own fintech company clearly shows that, the space is ripe for the picking. Like I said, I don't see whether you argue the maturity or infancy of our policies or laws or whatever. Like I said, I think is irrelevant in the sense that if you are a company that, that your vision is aligned with being able to serve your customers, and you are well educated enough, again, with the help of regulators like the NPC, that drives information, drives awareness, then doing or putting money in security and privacy is a no-brainer, right? It's a cost of doing business. You shouldn't look at it as an ROI or as a KPI, but just something that is bare minimum that you have to be able to do to delight. Then I think as long as everybody is hinged on that and see it not as a scary thing, but something that is really just part of the 21st century, then I think there should be no issues, right? So I think FDIs can definitely come in.
Jack, if I may just add, we
Yes.
must not forget that we have other regulators that are very progressive. We're talking about the Banco Central and also the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And with them, again, with the open, the progressive outlook that they have, and I think it's really time, as Anton mentioned, for FinTech to really grow and explode.
That is true. Commissioner, what Anton was saying to me is really like a shift of mindset. To me, data privacy and some aspects of it are still like KPIs, not a minimum. So that's a big change when you imply that as part of the corporate policy. So that has got to be the
actually,
change.
Jaco, the situation is, if you don't adopt security as proposed by Matt, cybersecurity and privacy, if you haven't heard about it, then probably your competitors have heard about it and they're already ahead of you. So it is really your lookup on whether you have to take up cybersecurity and privacy, and in which a part of the totem pole in your company priority do you put cybersecurity and privacy. I think the rule here, Anton, is that if you're gonna be a digital laggard in terms of cybersecurity and privacy, then you might just be overtaken by your competitors.
Exactly, that's true. Attorney JJ, I'd like to hear from you. What are the things that you're looking forward that is not yet in the public that you want to share in that delightful invitation for other companies to come over to the Philippines?
Well, I just like to go back on the earlier discussion on data privacy and the you're talking, it's KPI, it's a culture that we're trying, and certainly the NPC is trying to create. But one of the other things I think that the NPC has been successful at is really communicating to everyone, to a lot of people, that privacy is a human right. And I know it might be, and in fact they've demonstrated this in the fintech space with respect to online lenders, when a lot of online lenders were sending messages and engaging in unfair collection practices, the NPC stepped up and they protected these individuals. So I think that's a good development. So you have to think of the customers not only to protect their security, but also to protect their security in order to protect their privacy, because it is a human right. Now, with respect to the Philippines as a destination, for investment, I think there's a lot of possibilities here. We're an English-speaking nation. We have 100 million people. The market is big. Penetration is big. FinTech is starting to come together. So when you build that layer of payments underneath, then you can put any kinds of services, right? Consumer-based services, and it's like it will spread like wildfire. So it's a sort of thing that I think our government is on. The BSP, they are working, in concert with the different agencies in making this happen. And it's very, there's a lot of hope that I think that we can see. We know that we're going through a lot of difficult things right now, the pandemic and the pandemic response. But I think FinTech is a bright spot. We've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of development in this space, and I hope it will continue, and that will bring other things. So gaming is one big space I think that we will see, esports, etc.
Yeah. Well, with that in mind, is it like a simultaneous development on those kinds of industries in terms of technology and them coming over and do business and ease of doing business? Is it something, Attorney JJ, that you could possibly marry in with your, let's say, relations?
So I think what's going to happen is there might be more localized regulation. Philippines might want to say, if you want to access the Philippine market, 100 million strong, pay taxes, have a location here, maybe have a lot of that, bring a lot more technological knowledge and expertise and build up their expertise. This is what I'd like to see. It's human resource development, having our guys learn, right, how to build these services. And these guys will then spin off, right, and make their own startups. We already have a vibrant startup community. We want that to grow even further. And I think, and what I see in a lot of entrepreneurs, and I really credit Chairman Liboro for this. A lot of entrepreneurs now, the first thing, one of the first questions out of the gate is they'll ask, what's the data privacy aspect in my business model? Now, this is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs did not ask before, but I think with the Data Privacy Act and with the inaugural data privacy commissioners, they have really come forward and put this as some front and center for our entrepreneurs. And I think that's a good thing, because if we have that in mind, then it's easier for us to go out and comply with data privacy laws on a global scale.
Well,
Exactly.
Jay and Jago, since we're now talking about 2020 AD or after the disease,
Yeah.
so probably we have to come up with some very promising, well, developments that we can expect. As well, JJ, since you mentioned these young entrepreneurs and even programmers, you mentioned Jago. But really, one of the emphasis or one of the introductions, if you may consider it, is that we will be introducing what we call a regulatory pilot space very soon, and we will be coming up with guidelines on how, again, a regulatory pilot space is not different from a regulatory sandbox where we can unleash the creativity and innovation that is happening, and in a safe space where risks, but with benefits, with promised benefits, but also risks, then we can create a sandbox or a situation where we can, experiment on this innovation. Again, with our innovators, really encouraging them, right, to unleash their creativity. But again, this is something that we can that they can look forward to. But just to prove that regulators here in the Philippines have really the progress and enabling business trust in mind whenever we do our regulation.
Yes. Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's very inspiring. I hope we have a lot more time because we can go on and on with this topic. But Matt, any last few words you want to say?
If I come off, yes, I have come off mute there. I think it's a really interesting conversation here as I reflect on it, and I'm going to call out one thing that I think is really a really critical component here that the Commissioner called out, and that is the concept of privacy by design. And we work a lot in cyber and talk about secure by design. And if I could, I think about one takeaway point for fintechs listening to this and the entire Philippine sort of community in that regard is to think about we've talked quite a bit around, what happens if you've got to play catch up, if you've got to respond and react and those sorts of things. So I think that for a medium-term business outcome, if you really focused in on that one point around privacy by design and in turn from a cybersecurity point of view, secure by design and that shift left in the process, that would be my one really strong takeaway out of this conversation that I think could be a real game changer and catalyst. So, 110 million people with a vibrant fintech environment, a vibrant financial services environment, if it is secure, that's what's going to make it sustainable, I think.
That's true. Thank you very much, Matt. Anton, before we leave, I sense in your voice that you have this cheerleading capacity to influence this kinds of like movement, as Attorney JJ would say. I would say I'd like to plug in our developer community to be a human rights defender for that. Anton, any last few words?
No, I mean, I just really, I think, like 2020 has been a, troublesome year with the pandemic and all. And I think, if ever really the silver lining, the light at the end of the tunnel, the beacon of hope is that, I do think that it has pushed the country towards a massive digital push and transformation. I think this would be the catalyst for that. And, what we could hope is that, all of the different companies in this space, whether corporate, whether startup, will be able to respond to that call to action. And I think it's really going to accelerate not just, fintech, not just security, not just privacy, but, just really big digital ecosystem as a whole. And you really unlock our economy for massive growth over the next 5 years. So I think it's exciting, right? It's exciting. It's December already. 2021 is almost here. So,
That is
it's time
true.
to be
That is true.
hopeful.
Don't forget, Anton, we are Filipinos and we are always resilient. So it goes with it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Matt, thank you very much for joining us from Australia. Attorney JJ, we have we met a long time ago with JJ as Bira as well. Thank you very much for joining. You're the conduit to this conversation as well. Anton is the leader for this technology. Thank you very much. And of course, Commissioner Raymund Liboro for putting it all together. And in the name of Geyser Maklang, thank you very much for joining us for this World FinTech Festival Philippine stage. Thank you.
Thank you.